Hello everyone. So for today's card, I was inspired by a card that Jennifer R did for the Watercolor for Card Makers class over on Online Card Classes. And in it, she had hand painted this tree, and really fun and easy technique, and it kind of got me thinking. So for my card, I'm just using a piece of regular watercolor cardstock. Usually I use the Tim Holtz, but this time I'm just using like standard watercolor cardstock that I picked up at Michael's, which is more of an off-white color, and I trimmed it down to kind of a narrower rectangle. It's about 2 inches by a little over 4 1/4, like 4 3/8 inches. And then I taped it down to this Epicurean cutting board. Mine is from Lee Valley Tools. I don't know if you have that in the States, but I got mine here in Canada. And it's just really nice because you can tape down your watercolor paper to that, and it kind of keeps it from warping as much. Plus it's heat resistant, so I can use my heat tool between and all that fun stuff. So I'm just using a wide flat watercolor brush I dampen the cardstock first, and then I'm just applying a really light wash of some green watercolor, and I'm just using some watercolor paints that I've had in my stash for years. I don't have a source for these, I won't have a link for them, but I can link to ones that are similar. So I just did the wash, and then I'm drying it with my heat tool. And then basically what I'm trying to create is like this background of trees. And I had practiced this beforehand. I was just kind of playing around, as I've been doing a lot lately with watercolor. And I really liked the result of the piece I did, so I decided to do it again on camera here. And one tip I'll give, and which Jennifer gave in her video, you definitely want to protect your work surface because you get paint everywhere. So I've got like 2 big pieces of paper towel behind the painting, and kind of it's like propped up around my desk here, because when you flick the paint like this, it just goes everywhere. So basically all I'm doing is just picking up, I applied a light wash along the top of the cardstock, and then I'm picking up the watercolor paint with my paintbrush, and then yeah, you just tap it against your fingers and it flicks the color everywhere. And on the areas where I'd applied the wash, you can see the color just kind of blends out naturally, which is really neat. So I dried that layer, and then I'm just going to keep doing this over and over and over again to just kind of build it up and make it look like treetops. So it's really fun, really easy, because all you got to do is flick paint, and you can kind of practice with how much water you use, how much color you use, the way you flick your brush. You could even use like an old toothbrush if you want, and drag your finger across it and like make splatter everywhere. But yeah, no matter what you do, you're gonna get splatter everywhere. It's kind of amazing how far it's gone, and sometimes I'll just notice like green splotches like on the far corners of my desk or on the floor in different places. So really fun technique. Your kids would love it too. So I made sure to do this one without my kids around, because especially if my 8-year-old saw this, she would have a field day and I'd have paint splattered all over my house. So yeah, anyway, I just kept doing this in layers and kind of drying it between layers. You could let it dry naturally if you wanted. I don't have the time or the patience for that, so I just keep using my heat tool. And then some of the splatters I just add in purposely with the tip of the paintbrush, just to get, bigger areas. You can practice with adding more or less water. It's totally up to you. I kept this mostly to just greens, and then I added in a little bit of a mustardy yellow color just to kind of change things up a little bit. And I just kept going till I was happy with it. So at the very end, I kind of mixed up a bit of a darker green just to give it a little bit more definition. But the cool thing with this is no matter what you do, it's going to look completely different every single time. I did save the first piece I did and finished the card in the same way, and I'll show a picture of that at the end, so it's kind of neat. But yeah, for this one, I purposely chose this size and this kind of a shape to use with a certain stamp I got. I got this little magenta deer stamp from the paper trail, and it's really, really small, and I was kind of stumped with how I was going to use it. So when I was playing around with this watercolor technique, and like specifically the trees, I thought that would be perfect to put the stamp in. So you'll see that in a couple minutes. But once I was happy with this like splattered treetops, I just took some brown watercolor and a finer brush, and I just started painting in some trunks, just freehand painting, nothing too fabulous. I'm not too great at it, but yeah, it's pretty much just straight-ish kind of squiggly lines, and you paint a little bit here and there into the treetops as well to look like, exposed branches. And I painted them at different levels, so basically it just looks like a big grove of trees. So Nothing too fancy, obviously not going for realism here because I just would not be very good at that. But once I was kind of happy with the trees as I had them painted in, I'm going to go back in after they're mostly dry and just add in a little bit of a darker brown just to give it a little bit more detail and finish it up. And then technically I should have left that as is, but I can't leave well enough alone. That is one of my worst things, is I keep wanting to mess with it. One thing to do is, if you're not happy with it, is to just walk away from it and come back. It's amazing how things can look completely different, but I wasn't liking how it was looking, so then I started adding in a deeper green for basically the ground, which I should have just left as is. Like, I started messing with it and was kind of going way too overboard. That was the whole reason why I did the wash in the first place, was because on my first piece I didn't do a wash and I didn't like how the trees looked like they were just kind of floating and they needed a bit of ground to be on. So I did the wash for this one to defeat that purpose, and then still ended up like painting in the ground and kind of smearing things and just, I don't know. But I just went with it anyway because when it's done, you know, you're not going to totally notice that, and the person who gets this card isn't going to see, like, hopefully they won't see the video and know that I totally messed it up. So once I was done with messing around with it, I'm going to peel off all the tape. You want to be careful with the painter's tape when you do this. It usually comes off quite cleanly, but if you pull it too fast, you can tear the watercolor paper. So once I've done that, I've got this, this magenta stamp, and on online it looks like a decent size, and it shows up and it's tiny. So I wasn't sure how I was going to incorporate it onto a regular card. Like, I was kind of stumped with it, but then I thought about doing this technique, and I'm also going to make an actual smaller card. So I first just stamped it onto this watercolor piece. I'm using My Favorite Things new hybrid hot fudge ink. And again, I couldn't leave well enough alone. It was pretty much fine as is, but I didn't like that I didn't stamp it as well as I should have. Plus, I'm using the textured side of watercolor paper, so no stamp is going to stamp like completely opaque. So basically all I did was just grab some dark brown watercolor and just went over it. And since the ink is waterproof when it's dry, it won't smear, like the ink isn't going to bleed out anywhere, and you can see it doesn't go anywhere. So I'm just able to kind of go over it and deepen the stamped image a bit so it stands out a bit more, which isn't bad, but I could have just left it. Like, there's no need to keep fiddling with things, but I can't leave well enough alone. So I fiddled with it until I was happy with it, and then I'm going to go on to my card. So for the card, I decided to make this image work, I'd make a slightly smaller card. So I'm actually making a 4-bar note card, which is 3.5 inches by 4 7/8 inches. So I've never made this size before, but I've seen a lot of it online, and I really like the look of it. It just makes, well, smaller images stand out a lot more. And yet it's not that much smaller than your standard A2 cards. So I decided to do that, and I'm using MFT's whipped cream cardstock, and then a stamp from my All About Dad stamp set, which again I stamped with the Hot Fudge hybrid ink. And I just use my stamp positioner to line it up on the card. And then I'm using dimensionals to pop up this main image. My order of foam tape hadn't arrived when I filmed this. So I used my dimensionals, but that worked just as well. So it just pops it up a little bit and gives it that little extra something. And then to finish off the inside of the card, I'm just going to stamp the deer again with the same ink. And then I've got a sentiment from the All About Dad set that I'm going to line up again with my stamp positioner and stamp that. And that's all there was to it. So really fun, easy technique that anybody can do, and this card size I'm planning on doing more of because I really like it. It's just something different, and yet it's not too small that you can't just stick it in an A2 size envelope. I kind of held it up to an A2 envelope, and it'll work because I don't have any other envelopes. So as always though, there will be a link below to my blog post with links to all the supplies used. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!